Organizing my course and all of my assessments by learning outcomes has completely changed how I approach my classroom and how I do mastery based learning. So, in this video, what I want to do is just walk you through a really quick way to come up with learning outcomes for your course and to talk a little bit about why learning outcomes are so important and how everything kind of aligns with what I am doing in my classroom. So let's just kind of jump right in and start talking about it. All right, so in my previous video, I talked about how I organize my Google Drive by learning outcomes. So I thought it was really important that we talk a little bit about what are learning outcomes anyway, and why do I organize my course this way, and what's the whole purpose, and how do I come up with them. So, really, learning outcomes is kind of the basis of my entire grading architecture within my classroom. So, everything is highly aligned with those learning outcomes. Now, typically, what I do for a course is I come up with, if it's a full semester, I come up with about 15 or 16 learning outcomes. I've played with a bunch of different numbers in the past. But I feel like this is a sweet spot for me because our semesters are typically 20 weeks. And so 16 of them gives me a pacing of roughly one learning outcome per week. And then all of my assessments can kind of align with that structure, giving me a few weeks at the end of my course in order for my students to be able to do reassessments on different learning outcomes. So it works out really nicely in terms of doing 16. Just showing you here, this is one example of one of my courses. This is my grade 11 chemistry course. And like I said, I have it divided. I actually have 20 learning outcomes in this one. So let me explain why. I have 16 content learning outcomes. So these are 16 distinct key concepts that I want my students to take away from this course by the end of the course. For example, I have inorganic nomenclature, I have chemical reactions, and so on, all the way down to ionic and covalent bonding. Each one is set up then where it is a specific piece of content or set of core skills that kind of go together. So, for example, the mole concept, if you don't know chemistry, it's okay. But the mole concept, there's a few different calculations you can do to interconvert between particles, amount, mass, and molar mass. So they all kind of go together. And any assessments that I do are focused just on that particular skill. So I have 16 content learning outcomes for this course. And then the last four, 17, 18, 19, and 20, are lab skills. So I will assess my lab skills separately. I still have them as learning outcomes though, because I want to give students lots of opportunities to be able to build and demonstrate these skills as they're going through my course. So I have one on recording data. I have one on processing data, so doing all the calculations that go along with that, presenting that process data in nice data tables and graphs, and then finally one on like lab performance and safety and how they are actually doing those particular skills within the lab. So those four get assessed a little bit differently, but still all of my labs are aligned to assessing at least one of these learning outcomes for the lab skills, but most of the time I have two within a lab. So I will hit on these learning outcomes 2 or 3 times within a semester, each one with the different labs that I run in my class. So that gives my students lots of opportunities to work on those particular lab skills. Now, it can be kind of daunting to come up with these particular learning outcomes. In the past, before AI, what I used to do is sit down with my curriculum and my units and the way I used to teach based on unit. And I would look at all of my key lessons and then try and cluster and group the different concepts together until I refined it down to around 16 or so. But I've been playing with Gemini over the past day or so, and I have created a Gemini gem. in order to be able to come up with these. And so it's really been very helpful for me to come up with that. So let me find, oh my goodness, where did it go? Okay, so let me open my learning outcomes generator gem that I created recently. I will put a link in the description below if you'd like it. Just please be aware that this particular gem I've set up specifically more for science courses. So if you want to take it and tweak it for your own use and for your own sort of situation, you can do that and you can edit the particular gem. So if you haven't created a gem before, just kind of going back in here, let me show you in this particular gem. It'll show up in your shared with you once you've opened it once. You should be able to make a copy of it and then go in and edit the gem for yourself. It's got a name, a bit of a description, and then if you wanted to change some of the particular sort of content things here, you can go in and change that. So the lab skills outcome, if it's something you don't need, you can go in and get rid of it if you do not need it. But this is what I love about gems, is that we can share them and make our life easier. What I've done with this particular gem is I've set it up so that all you have to do is tell it what course, what curriculum you're referencing, and then it should come up with fairly evenly divided learning outcomes for a course. So say I want to create, I'd like to create learning outcomes for SNC 2D, which is grade 10 science in Ontario. So it's going to actually go and reference the Ontario science curriculum and pull back and hopefully bring back good learning outcomes that we can use, or at least use as a jumping off point in terms of our planning. So here it's taking 4 main units. So we've got biology, chemistry, earth and space science, which is climate change for this one, and then physics, which is a unit on optics. And it's balancing out 16 content learning outcomes across all 4 units in order to ensure full coverage, giving them to us in I can statements, which are great because then hopefully there's very little tweaking you need to use in order to use with students. So I'm just looking at this for biology. It's got stages of the cell cycle and mitosis, explaining cell specialization, hierarchy, structure, and interaction between different systems. And to me, those are all the main concepts. Like I know this course quite well, so those 4 learning outcomes actually make a lot of sense to me. In terms of the chemistry unit, we've got one on predict the properties of elements in the formation of ionic and molecular compounds. Yeah, okay. Can write correct formulas and names. Yes, that's a big thing there. Now it's given me 5. I might actually combine 5 and 6 together to make 1. Applying the law of conservation of mass to balance equations. That's a big thing. Types of reactions is a big thing for grade 10. And then pH scale. Yeah, so like I'm pretty happy with what it's come up with. Now, if I wasn't too happy, like say I didn't love that it came up with 5 for chemistry and only 3 for physics, I could go in and ask it to regenerate that for me. But this, I think, is a really nice jumping off point to start thinking about how do you divide up your course into learning outcomes that make a lot of sense for then setting up your evaluations and all of your different assessments. So this is great because it's now asking me, do I want to generate a sample test question for any of the specific outcomes? So maybe I can say, sure, let's see what you can generate for LO1. And let's see what that gives us. So assessing gives us a multiple choice question, diagram labeling. I mean, yeah, it would sort of fit those particular assessments. So I would probably build on this and take from my own resources and come up with these assessments. But I think one of the big benefits of doing this and setting up all of your resources, your outcomes, your assessments, all by learning outcome, is that it makes it so much easier to talk to parents and even talk to students about what they're not doing well in and where they can focus to improve their marks or improve their grades, because that is the question that we all get on parent teacher night is, okay, Jimmy's doing great, he's at an 80%, but how can he become a 90% student? And so if all your assessments are aligned by learning outcome, then you can say, okay, well, Jimmy's done 90% in learning outcomes 1, 3, and 5, but is scoring only 60% in learning outcomes 2 and 4. So those are the areas that Jimmy can go focus on and study for in order to work on those skills so that he can improve his grade. So it's really, really useful for having those parent conversations for sure. Now, take this with a grain of salt. If you're going to use this learning outcomes generator gem, make sure you're going and checking and cross-referencing back with your particular curriculum documents. You want to make sure you're generating something that makes sense. You also want to go back and cross-reference it with all of your lessons and previous things you've done to teach your course. But it's a really fast, easy, friendly way to get started with reorganizing your resources for your classroom in this way. So that's it for this video. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.